Firstly, thank you guys for being so generous. It's always that weird thing when something you've worked on quite intensely is sort of tiptoeing out into the world, so thanks, it means a great deal. One of the great appeals to me about this piece was that enigma, really, was that kind of, I don't know, is it an opaqueness? In the original movie, which I grew up loving, the Zimmerman movie, Edward Fox, who plays the Jackal, is this kind of, is really a force of charisma, and you know nothing about him in 2 hours. And it's so compelling, but he is very much evil, albeit extraordinarily charismatic in that evilness. But with this, when these scripts arrived, there was a level of trepidation because you don't want to butcher something that you adore. But when I saw the scripts that Ronan Bennett had written, updating it to the now, and adding in this whole other backstory about this man's life, which you just catch a glimpse of at the end of that episode, this idea of how you could cohere that blankness, that opaqueness, that sort of casual ruthlessness with someone who is seemingly a loving father and a loving husband was what was intriguing to me. What I loved about what the scripts did is they kind of kept that DNA of the original, which for me is this kind of old school analog world of spy craft. It's about the creating of things. It's about the artistry of it. One of the things that really thrilled me is he basically is an actor, and so in some ways the whole, as you can see even just from that first episode, all of the prosthetics, the physicality, the languages, that's the stuff we love. So I got to, the whole series in many ways felt like an actor's playground. I got completely off topic, but yeah.
Eddie's anticipating my questions. The similarity to the life of an actor was something I wanted to ask you about. I mean, he goes to far off places, he wears makeup, he portrays characters. He actually murders people literally. You don't do that, but presumably. But what are the parallels that you drew from? Did you see this as sort of an echo of the things you've done with your life?
Do you know, there are two things here. The first thing, I was doing this production of Cabaret in London when I was set these scripts, and just at that time, I'd been thinking of this idea for a television. So basically, when I was doing Cabaret, you got to meet some of the most extraordinary people. Politicians, celebrities, members of the royal family would come and see the show, and you got to meet them afterwards. And I was like, God, this sort of access to these extraordinary people you get is insane. Wouldn't it be interesting to do a television series in which you have this sort of actor, theatre actor, who also works in some kind of espionage, but uses all this access to these people? So I had this sort of idea, and then these scripts arrived in my inbox, and I felt like, I don't know that word manifesting, but I felt like I sort of manifested something. What I loved about the role was, whilst he is an actor in many ways, and you've got to, normally when I play parts, I sort of reach out to the parts, and in all the characters, and there are many other characters in the series other than the German, this guy Becker you just met. But, so you've got to do a lot of that, and a lot of that really trying to push the boundaries of what's believable, and in languages and physicalities and makeups and stuff. But also, how do you ground it in something that's real? And what I love about the series compared to some of the other films and TV in this genre is it tries to really stay true to something that people can connect with. And so I kept kind of going, well, how would I do this? How would I get away with this? Let's say I had all these skills. And so oddly, it was a character in which I got to leap into these other characters, but also a lot of it was about bringing it as close to me in these kind of horrendous scenarios. So if I was to try and con my wife into thinking, like, how would I go? It was all these sorts of horrible questions which I got to wrestle with.
Interesting you think of these things. I don't know. It's maybe you're showing us a little bit too much of yourself. I don't know. Putting yourself on a watch list. We used the word evil before, and I was just thinking maybe that's the wrong word, but there are different kinds of evil. There's sort of a sort of aggressive, malevolence, bitterness, somebody seeking revenge, doing evil deeds. With him, it's almost an indifference and a coldness, like a lizard-like quality that's the evil thing, that he doesn't seem like he wants to hurt people, but if you're in his way, there's a scene, I don't think this is giving away too much, but I won't say the full context of it, but where he just drives through a construction site and guys in hard hats are falling out of the sky, and it's like, he just doesn't care about those things. And I wondered about the dichotomy between playing a character who is indifferent to people suffering, yet has to have the empathy to make connections in order to do his job. He has to be an actor, you have to connect with people, and he's connecting with them one-on-one, playing these characters, and to get the doors open, to get the access he needs, he has to actually relate to people. And so what is that split in him?
That's I think split is the answer, and one of the things that I found sort of most compelling when you see images, like horrific images of whether it's war or sort of horrific acts in the newspaper, there's what almost becomes dehumanized to it. It's that the images are so extreme that you can't relate humanity to that situation somehow. You're at a distance. And I always feel that people in the army must have that feeling of being able to dehumanize it, because how else do you kind of engage with that? But what was interesting about a sniper is, on the one hand, what he's doing, as you kind of saw in that episode, it's deeply mathematical. I went to this place called Bisley outside of London, which is this firing range, and worked with these snipers, and it's all about the wind. And so you have, in that episode, you saw that little red thing that he puts up right by where you take the shot, but then there was also, I don't know if you saw, right by where the target was, there was another one hanging on a lamp, which you either see or you don't, but he's sort of preemptively placed there, and because you need to see the wind at both where you're taking the shot from and at the target. And it's about predicting the future then, like what is the travel of that bullet gonna be? So it's maths, it's sort of prediction, it's physics, which is
harmony, isn't it?
Which is something, exactly, all of those things together, but those are theoretical things, they're not human things in some ways, but then it also involves you looking through a scope and seeing someone's face intimately, and that demands a humanity and one thing. So what sort of person it takes to be able to do that, I think is pretty intriguing. What I found was that it was like there were two people, and this person believed he was a loner and a lone wolf, and capable of accomplishing this one way of living. But what came with that was the sacrifice of going, that's what my life is. And then he met this person, and you'll see more, and I don't want to give away too much, but that is his sort of Achilles heel in some ways. But there's almost a sociopathic quality to him.
He's hiding things from them too.
Yeah, and I think he completely invests in these two characters that he is, and he believes what he's saying. But as those when those two things have to kind of cohere, then it becomes complex.
You mentioned loving the 1973 film, and I wondered how you came to watch that. Who introduced you to it? And,
my dad introduced me to it at far too young an age. I think I was about 7, along with Pretty Woman and Dirty Dancing, which were the favourite movies in the Redmayne household, and remain some of our favourite movies. But it's great, it's a classic. And I think my memories from when I was younger was just this heat, this kind of the exoticism of the locations, the elegance, this kind of like deadly flaneur quality of the character, and kind of the peacocking as well of Edward Fox in that series. You know, his fashion was so cool and on point, and I love that he cared about that. There was also, even at that young age, I think I sort of knew that I loved acting, and the fact that he was changing all these things, and he was, you know, putting his leg up and tying that up and using it with crutches, and all of those things felt, again, very analog, but really appealing. So I don't remember the plot so much. I certainly didn't understand the politics and the de Gaulleness of the situation, but I really loved that kind of thrilling intrigue.
You understood the lone wolf aspect. That must have been cool to a kid to be allowed to watch something that felt a little transgressive, a little older.
So. I think maybe, yeah. I think it was, and again, there was just a catharsis in everything, in that it's this idea of setting things up and really pre-planning things, and then almost like setting up a sort of all these chains of dominoes, and then that this catharsis and satisfaction when you flick one over. I mean, it was the planning and the chess playing of it. And it's the interesting thing about our writer, Ronan Bennett, is he lives in Cadiz. He is obsessed with chess. He collects old chess pieces. He used to write a chess column in the Guardian newspaper. He's also a bird watcher. I don't know if we got to the bird watching.
He disappears for weeks at a time.
I mean, seriously, I'm not saying. But so it was. I spent a bit of time with him in Cadiz, and it was quite interesting watching. There is definitely, I think he's placed a bit of himself in there. Yeah.
Well, as somebody who loved that original film, and I don't know if you ever read the novel as well, the Frederick Forsyth book. And you're an executive producer on this series. Were there things you wanted to preserve that stuck in your memory from your own appreciation of that work that you thought should be treated as homage? It is an update to the story. It's a story that was set a half century ago.
Well, I think that the series is made with great love and affection for the original, but because I watched the film for so many years, when it arrived in my inbox, there was definitely this trepidation. But because it was set now, it felt like a different piece. It felt like something completely other, but it retained some of those qualities. This old school, analog over digital quality. But also what I loved in the update was that Lashana, who is so brilliant in the series, her character, in the book and the film, it was pretty binary. It was like the Jackal was evil, and he was charismatic but evil, and the Michael Lonsdale character, the detective, was good, and as was de Gaulle. Whereas I feel like now you have the Jackal, who is, and Bianca, both of whom are ferociously talented, obsessive, meticulous, passionate about their jobs, but both have a kind of these moral, questionable morals of those. And I loved this idea of audiences oscillating in their affections and kind of going, I'm repelled by this person, yet I'm kind of intrigued by them. But knowing that also you kind of get behind both of these characters, but with the understanding that they're on a one-way collision path. And structurally, I found that pretty intriguing. So what we tried to do from the original is bring many elements, Easter eggs. There are direct lines from the book. There's actually in a later episode a shot-by-shot recreation of, I don't know if I want to say it, but one of the iconic scenes from the original. And then with Natalie Humphreys, our wonderful costume designer, we lent into the fashion. There's his Edward Fox's. He can really pull off a neck chief, that guy. And so we try to integrate a few neck chiefs into the situation. But it's like, how do you pull that in without it looking, whilst looking contemporary? And trying.
I don't want to give away too much either. But the Bianca's character, Lashana's character, we get a taste of it in this first episode. She's willing to put innocent people at risk to get her mark, to get this man or this person that she believes is deeply dangerous. But it kind of reminds me of that debate about, like, should police chase a suspect if you're putting other innocent lives at risk, if the chase leads to a greater car crash. And I think, like this show proves, sometimes you can create a greater car crash by chasing the getaway suspect.
You definitely can. she definitely does. But also what Lashana, I don't want to speak for her, but I know that she was so compelled by was the messiness of the character, was her obsession with work, the fact that is where Bianca is at her most fully like vibrant almost, and that there are shortcomings at home, and that she loved the knottiness of that. And again, that this person was someone that would barge into rooms that would not take no for an answer. But I think it's a really good question now in the world of espionage. There's only so much bureaucracy presumably one can deal with. If you need checks and balances every time you do something that is fundamentally deeply illegal, like where is the line? And I imagine that there are people making those sort of those instinctive choices daily.
It's that eternal question of, is the cure worse than the disease?
And that is the greater good, or whatever that means.
But you don't get a lot of scenes with her because she's chasing you. That's just how these stories go. But there are, we saw a glimpse of it in the little preview reel that they did at the end of the episode. Tell me about your relationship with her. Did you talk to her to create a kind of harmony between your performances, even though you're not working together in the same scenes, you're in the same show, and creating a kind of parallel track, I guess, for these two figures?
Do you know, it was one of the most surreal experiences of my life, because Lashana and I met in the gym about 2 months before filming started. And that was virtually the only time we physically saw each other for, I would say, 5 months, because the show was shot in many locations. It was shot frequently with 2 crews. So Lashana would be in London, I'd be in Croatia or in Budapest, and our friendship was forged over the sort of producing side. So it was on phone calls and Zoom calls, talking about edits, talking about and I think we were sort of conscious that we were playing characters that were 2 sides of the same coin, but we didn't over scrutinize that. The way that the show was sort of structured did most of that work for us. But it's been amazing getting to work with her, and particularly in post-production, her facility for music, particularly her attention to detail. Lashana and I joke that they cast sort of the right people for borderline obsessive sort of characters, because we're down to every VFX shot, and we were sort of in the weeds in a really lovely way, and trying to retain, because this genre, I suppose, is familiar, but I do think there's something unique to who the Jackal is and to who Bianca is that we really wanted to hold true to in the way that the piece has been put out into the world, the way it's marketed, and so we've been pretty rigorous with that.
Producing means different things to different people. It's a job that encompasses a lot of different duties. So what is it that you find most exciting about that obsessive process? Is it the post-production? Is it early during the shooting, during the script phase? What do you get the most excited about working on in that capacity?
I don't know if it's excited, but there's a really different way but I found really it was a massive learning curve, is that television is not made in the same way. I haven't done television for a while, and I haven't realised the difference between making television in America and making television in the UK. We don't have a showrunner, so that doesn't really exist as an entity. And I remember sort of a couple of weeks after I'd signed on and was working on things, and I called the producers and I was like, guys, so who do I go to for the sort of creative? And they were like, well, if you want the writing, you go to Ryan. If you want to think, and there were so many different. And this was produced by Peacock and Sky and Universal and Carnival. So there were so many different people, and I'm so used to on film there being the director, the person who and so. What Lashana and I realised, of course, we had 4 different directors across 10 episodes, and we sort of, in some ways, became the glue between the episodes, and found that really enthralling, and being able to go, this was a moment that we played in episode 1, can we weave that into episode 6? Silly things like the process of, as I started to prep for some of these prosthetics, I worked with a brilliant makeup artist called, prosthetics makeup artist called Richard, and we went to his studio, and he scanned my face, and then he showed me this extraordinary kind of polystyrene sculpture of my head that he then sculpted on, and I was like, we need that sculpture on the set. Like we need that in the Jackal's sort of office once you get there. And then he had these amazing old clay tools that he sculpted the clay with, and I was like, we need those. So trying to bring to the fore, because I think so often in TV and film, particularly with prosthetics, you have that moment of the thing being taken off, whereas what I love is the complexity of that process and how long it takes, and how long it also takes to take that stuff off, and can we sort of bring some of those skills that are often hidden behind the curtain and put them in the forefront. And I mean, it was just a little thing, but it was a wonderful, because you can then feed those things to the director and to the producers, the other producers, and go like, these are, I suppose, perhaps feel validated to bring more ideas to the table.
The last thing I want to ask you is that the character himself, there's a loneliness to him. He doesn't have a Watson to talk about his thoughts with, or go through his process with. As we discussed, he splits these parts of his life. He doesn't share with the people he's closest to what he really does. He kind of tunes out who they are when he's in these situations doing cold-blooded things. How do you immerse yourself in that sense of him and convey the sort of loneliness of evil?
Well, I would give most of that credit to Ronan, our writer, because some writers, I don't know how you guys find, but can overwrite. And you're explaining all the thoughts, and Ronan really had faith in the silence, and from looking at the original movie as well, you can really, if you see the strength of some of the unspoken. And what I love is that you begin to learn more about the jackal as he integrates with other people in his life, and you see these kind of facets of almost like a shard of glass. You see different things reflected, and you begin to get a sense of who that whole may be. That doesn't really answer your question.
No, it does.
Maybe I'm doing that on purpose.
Well, thank you for answering all the other questions. We have a reception afterward. Please join us and hang around for a little while. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Eddie Redmayne. The Day of the Jackal begins November 14th.